So I've gone ahead and set up all my guitars and basses behind me. I thought it would be fun to document my collection, starting with this limited edition gold foiled Jazzmaster by Fender and Shoreline Gold. It sounds like this. This is a pretty new addition to my collection, and I have a full demo and unboxing video on my channel that you can watch. However, now that I've had it for a little bit, I still really love it. I love the 3 pickups. The neck position is still my absolute favorite, but I love how you can individually pick what pickup is in or out of the circuit. So you can have all 3, you could have just the neck and the bridge, you could have any combination of these pickups together or separate. I love the ebony fretboard with the block inlays, has awesome binding. Normally, I'm not a big fan of Bigsby's, but for a guitar like this, I really, really love it, because this isn't a guitar that I'm gonna be punk rock, just, you know, not worrying about where my hand is and just fast, where normally the Bigsby would get in the way for me. I see this guitar as something you find in a studio and it just sits with you during your recording session for just little things here and there, because it is really a treat for that aspect. But this isn't going to be a #1 guitar for me in my playing style. This is a 2020 Gibson SG Special in Pelham Blue. I was convinced to buy this by my buddy Joe from Carter Vintage here in Nashville, and I didn't have a guitar with P90s, and he was like, you need a guitar with P90s. And so I picked this up, and it has quickly become one of my favorite guitars in my collection. I love everything about this. I did change out the bridge because the normal wrap tailpiece, I don't understand why guitars have that. I understand that that was a historic spec and that's why a lot of guitars do that, but you can't intonate it. So I went ahead and changed that and now have something that I can intonate and keep in tune. But I love these reflector top knobs. Pelham Blue is just absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite guitar colors. It just screams, and especially for what is essentially a single coil pickup, it just has a lot of bite and grit to it, and it really cuts through in the way that I like guitars to cut through. This is my custom modded Yamaha Revstar that Yamaha so graciously sent me. This was just one of their stock models, but I had them change a couple things. I had them put in my favorite set of Seymour Duncan pickups. So we have a 59 and a JB, but also I asked for a kill switch because I like guitars to have kill switches. And when they asked, okay, do you want a toggle or a button, I had never even considered a button before, and so I told them, let's go with both, and they freaking did it. They also changed the tuners to be locking tuners, but this guitar is probably my #1 in the studio. This is the meat and potatoes of my guitar sound. This through a dual rec, it's hard to beat. It's full, it's fat, it's just a great sound. And Yamaha isn't a very well-known or popular guitar brand, but man, they're surely hard to beat. And the 2 kill switches is a really cool thing. Have a lot of fun with that. Get to do a lot of interesting, weird sounds. But it was also the first time a company had ever come to me and been like, what do you want? And they did it for me. So I am eternally grateful for Yamaha in doing that. Thank you, Scott. Moving on to the first bass of this video, this is a limited edition Gibson Chris Novaselic Signature RD. And this thing is wild. It is a long scale. I'm not a big guy, so F position is almost like full arm extension for me. It's pretty heavy, which is great. It's just pure tone. And then you have the bassline Seymour Duncan pickups. It's just a fantastic bass. And I believe only 800 or 1,000 of these were ever built, and it's definitely special. Everything you want from just a punk rock grunge bass. And I will say, if you use a pick in like a Tech 21 or a Boss DS1, it really does give you those early Nirvana sounds. And going to our first acoustic guitar, this is an Epiphone Masterbilt Excelente. I bought this guitar in London. It was at Regent Sound on Denmark Street, which if you've never been to Denmark Street, it is every guitar player and musician's dream. It is just a block of the greatest vintage guitar stores that England has to offer. And I walked into Regent Sound and one of the guitar store employees was just strumming, playing this guitar, and it was just singing. It was so beautiful. And I knew I was looking for a guitar that day, so I told him, I'll take it. He was like, do you want to play it? I was like, you sound great on it. You're not fighting the guitar. I'll take it. And just like that, it was sold. But this guitar, the attention to detail, the craftsmanship, there is a, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-piece neck, and it's just maple and walnut neck. It is just so gorgeous. The pickguard with the eagle on it. I've played a few shows with this guitar now, and every time I get a compliment on this guitar from how it sounds and how it looks. You have the waffle back clues and tuners. This guitar just has so much mojo, but most importantly, it sounds great. It just sings to you. Now this Manson M Series guitar was sent to me by Manson, and this is the ultimate guitar of fun. You have, again, 2 kill switches, which is something that I ripped off from my Yamaha. You also have a Sustainiac pickup, which means you can sustain a note basically indefinitely. Until the battery runs out, you can sustain any note forever. And you can change if it's the root note, the octave, or you can have a blend of the 2 notes. You also have a fuzz factory built into the guitar. Yeah, a fuzz pedal in the guitar. And then you top that off with the Floyd Rose. This is, again, a studio dream. I do a lot of weird things with this in my songs where you don't often hear what this guitar is doing, but it's adding a lot of depth and layers to the tracks, and it's just blended underneath to add depth but not necessarily be audible. But also, I have taken this guitar and I have turned on the fuzz, I've put it through a fuzz pedal, and then put it through my Lemmy Kilmister Marshall amp that I have, and have gotten one of the gnarliest guitar tones I've ever heard. Now, if you don't know much about Manson, they're a guitar company currently out of England whose current largest shareholder is Matt Bellamy from Muse. And what I love about the team at Manson, they told me straight up, if you can dream it, we can build it. If you have any idea that you want to see in a guitar, let us know and we'll make it happen for you. And that's such a cool and refreshing thing to hear from a guitar company, is like, no matter what you imagine, we'll do it for you. It's so liberating to see that aspect from a guitar manufacturer. A lot of guitar companies are so stuck in their ways, but the innovative spirit of Manson has not come lost on me. And one thing I really want to point out is the wood grain on the back of the neck. To me, I just love it. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't like the streakiness of it, but I think it is so cool. This, alongside its twin, is the newest addition to my collection, and this is the Epiphone Korina V. Originally in 1958, they made, I think, 81 of these guitars. Super rare, super hard to get, but this was the invention of the V guitar. And this is a exact recreation of that. Obviously, you have some slight differences with the pickups and such. The Korina is such a light wood, and it's so easy to play. It's fun to play, and you have this iconic V on your lap. Now, the Epiphone badge, what I really love, it is actually a badge. It's like embossed on there, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, that replicates the original, but Epiphone originally lent me this guitar to film a video, a music video, and after having it a couple days and using it, I just fell in love with it. I needed to have it. And so worked with them, and man, am I so grateful to have this in my collection. They do have this really cool badge on the back that says Epiphone inspired by Gibson, because again, this is inspired by the 1958 original V. I love the rubber embedded in the guitar. It helps keep it stable. A lot of people think you play Vs like that. No, you play them just like a classical guitar. It's not going anywhere. I have a full review and demo of this guitar, as well as the Explorer, available on my channel, and what a gem, what a beauty. But let's show you the Explorer. So this is the Explorer counterpart to the V, and again, based off the original 1958 design. Just like the V, that was a limited production run of 81 guitars, this was only 19. So 100 Korina guitars in 1958. One thing that's really cool about this set is they actually come with clones of the original hardshell cases. Yes, the Epiphones come with custom guitar cases. And I know you really shouldn't care about something like this, but when I play this or the V, I feel cool. Like, I feel like a cool guitar player, which I don't play guitar to feel cool, and more often than not, I don't feel cool because I'm not that cool. But these guitars just make you feel like a cool guitar player, and every once in a while, that's a nice feeling. But rosewood fretboard, two-piece Korina body, and there's really not much I would change about this guitar. I love the natural wood because it's just classic. You could play in a heavy metal band with this, you could play blues or jazz. You could play in a country band. It doesn't scream any one genre, and I think that's why these guitars are so sought after, as well as the specs and everything else. But just because they're so legendary and they don't scream, oh, I play X. They allow you to be who you are as a guitar player. I also have a full demo and review of both this and the V on my channel that you are welcome to go watch. This is a Yamaha broad bass, and this is my #1 bass. Any high energy rock stuff that I track, this is the bass sound. 100% of the time, guaranteed. I have tried to beat this sound, and I simply can't, which is a good problem to have, but it also blows my mind because this is actually the cheapest, most affordable Yamaha bass they make. Now, when Yamaha sent this to me, they completely gutted it and redid everything. So it's upgraded electronics, upgraded bridge, upgraded tuners, everything's been changed. But the body and the neck, this is a 234, which is their base model. One thing I did have Yamaha do for me is these controls don't work. These are just dummy knobs. They are not hooked up to anything, and it just has a kill switch. So it's on or off 100% or 0%. The reason I did that is because this bass was my primary live bass for a long time when I was touring plain bass, and I didn't want to have to worry about any knobs or headbanging and accidentally hitting something or someone actually bumping into me. I didn't want to worry about any of that. And so it's just on and off, and that works for me. That's not for everyone, but it works for me. This is my Fender Kurt Cobain Jazzmaster, and a lot of times this is a guitar that I gravitate to. I have a lot of great guitars, but man, I swear, you plug this thing into an amp, it doesn't sing, it yells aggressively, right in your face. It gets right into your personal space and yells straight in your face. And it's pretty awesome for that type of sound. And largely, that is the sound that I'm going for, and so I really gravitate to this guitar. Plus, I've always loved the offset body shape, and to have it with humbuckers, that's really special to me. Now, I don't care about this top section at all. I actually roll off the volume completely and get to use this as a little mini kill switch. I'll probably end up just throwing tape over that switch because I want it as a kill switch, so make sure the volume stays off and doesn't get rolled. I've also changed the bridge because the original bridge is worthless. Definitely change the bridge. This is a mastery bridge, which to me is really, really important. But I love the DiMarzio pickups. I think this is like a super distortion or something like that in the bridge. And I'm telling you, it yells in your face, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I also really, really love the binding of this guitar. So one cool thing about this guitar is it does come in a case, but in that case you have this little Kurt Cobain collection booklet thing that you only can get with this guitar. To be honest, it wasn't a selling point for me. Like, is it cool? Sure, yeah. But I flipped through it one time and it's lived in the case ever since. But that was just a neat little collector fan thing to have with this instrument. This is a Framus Parlor series guitar. To be honest, there's probably really nothing special about this instrument. It probably wasn't even crafted in Germany like Framus and Warwick is known for. However, I have probably written more songs on this guitar than maybe any other guitar in this room right now. For some reason, this guitar just speaks to me, so I write a lot of songs on it. It was originally given to me from Framus because there's cracks in the finish. I don't think the bridge is lifting at all. It doesn't seem to be, but there is big gashes, big cracks right through the finish and running up the body a pretty fair way. And so they couldn't sell it. They gave it to me. And thankfully, because I've, again, written so many songs. I keep this in open G, so that's a G chord without doing anything, but for some reason, I just connect with this guitar, and again, it's probably really nothing special at the end of the day, but it just works for me, and we have a connection now, and I'm very, very thankful for this guitar. I'll spend little to no time on these guitars, because as you can tell, they are basically non-viable instruments, but these guitars are leftovers from my music video Lost in You, where it was just a paint splatter party, and I thought the guitars came out kind of cool. I really love the bass and the guitar, but before I filmed that music video, these guitars were already not viable. You can't really see it anymore, but this bass, you can see a little bit, just had a big split in the body. It was separating from itself, which this is like $100 bass, so that's not worth repairing. And this guitar, between the tuners and the bridge, literally couldn't even tune up to E standard anymore. And so changing those things out on this little Dean, I forget what series it was, but you could see on the back of the headstock, I just put tape to make it not have this weird funky Dean headstock. So there's just black electrical tape that made it look like it's a somewhat normal headstock, but they were pretty cool. If you want to see the music video, it's live. I would love for you guys to watch it. It was a fun video to shoot, and we used gallons and gallons of paint that just made a giant mess. So go check it out. These are the results. This is my Gretsch 12 string, and what a joy it has been having this in my life. And a lot of the stuff I've been recording in the studio recently, I've been putting some of this on there. And again, kind of like how I use the Manson, it's not a lot of like super in-your-face audible 12-string stuff, but it's just there to add depth and layers. And so I blend it with other things in the tracks, and it just helps things shine. One of the biggest things about 12 strings though is keeping them in tune. Not just in tune to what a tuner says, but in tune to themselves. When you have this many strings, a lot can go wrong. But this is a really, really great guitar. I forget what series it is. It's a G5422G12. Hence why I don't remember the series name, because how the hell is anyone gonna remember that? But it is really great. I recommend. Don't get a 12 string for your first guitar. Don't get a 12 string for your second guitar. But once you have a good amount of guitars, and especially if you're a recording artist, you need one of these in your collection. It doesn't have to be this Gretsch 12, although I highly recommend it. It's beautiful. Get a 12 string nonetheless. You could also find some Gibson 12 string, like Les Pauls and stuff. Those look really cool. If I was going to get a second 12 string, that's probably what I would get. This is my hidden gem, or one of my hidden gems at least, in the recording studio. This is a Jack Casady signature Epiphone bass that I have flat wounds on, and it really is a great studio tool, and something that when people come over, it really gravitates to a lot of the people. And so I use it on a lot of tracks. I've had a lot of friends use this, and this was a COVID purchase for me. I found it on Craigslist. I think it was like $400 or something really stupid cheap at the time. And so I scooped it up, and I'm really happy I did, because it's appeared on a lot of tracks, and it's a fun instrument. I love the flat wounds. I think I've changed the strings once, like when I first got it, I put fresh flat wounds on it, but If you know anything about flat wounds, people typically don't change flat wounds very often. They want them dead and decaying to kind of give you that boomy sound, and this guitar does it. I have 3 basses that I keep flat wounds on, and between those 3 basses I have the flat wound acoustic vibe bass tone that I need on any track, and I stand by that. This is another guitar that was custom built for me by Music Man. It is a Mariposa in sparkle white, and to my knowledge this is the only Mariposa in this exact finish, which is really cool. It took like 6 months to get, which I'm not complaining, but it took a long time because they build from scratch. You put in an order with them and they start building once it comes into the queue. It's not something where they have a bunch of these sitting around or even just refinish a different one that they have. You put in an order, you tell them your specs, and they do it. Again, I had them put in my favorite set of Seymour Duncans, which is a 59 and a JB. I love the roasted maple neck. It feels so smooth and is great to play. There's also this awesome like heel curve, allows you to really get into the upper registers. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful guitar. It is pretty small. It is a tiny instrument, but what I have found with this guitar is it screams. And so a lot of my lead guitar playing work in the studio is this guitar because it's hot, it's loud, and it screams. I also love these Spurzl locking tuners with these like perloid tuning pegs. They're just beautiful and complement this guitar extremely well. That's not something that I asked for. I don't know if that's stock or standard on this instrument or not, but it really complements this guitar. So that was a nice touch. Obviously, Music Man is a much larger company, but it also might be a brand that you're sleeping on, and I definitely recommend looking into Music Man guitars and basses. This is what that sounds like. So this guitar is really, really special to me. This is a Framus Renegade from 2009 in kind of this natural finish. I was working with Framus in like 2017, 2016, something like that. And I was doing a show where Jay Weinberg and myself were putting together this big charity event for Best Buddies. I had an exclusive contract with Framus at the time, which means I could only play Framus and Warwick stuff. However, we were doing some Bruce Springsteen songs on the show with members of the E Street Band. So Max Weinberg and Gary W. Talent from the E Street Band. And I was Bruce. I was singing, I was playing guitar. You need to play a Telecaster, but I have an exclusive contract with Framus. So they had this guitar in the showroom. Again, it's from 2009, so it had been sitting around for a long time and kind of like the redheaded stepchild that just no one would get. And I told him, I'm gonna play a Telecaster on these songs, so you can either give me this guitar or I'm gonna play a Fender. I'm forever grateful because this does have a very special memory. There's certain instruments that you bond with in a special way, and this is one of them. It's also super, super light and just great to just pick up and putz around with. Great in the studio. I do have this sitting nearby my desk in the studio. And so a lot of times when I'm demoing things, I just go right to this guitar because I know that it's going to give me a great sound. So I really, really love this guitar, and it's something that I'll never sell. I'll never part ways with this guitar. So thank you, Framus. I know we're not working together anymore, but I do appreciate our time together, and this guitar is very, very special to me. While we're talking about Best Buddies, I will bring up this guitar. This is a custom-built Fender Telecaster that Fender built us for our charity show. They did the custom Best Buddies logo on the guitar, and this was signed by all the performers that night. So you have Gary W. Talent and Max Weinberg. You also have Ben Wyman from Dillinger Escape Plan, Arun Bali from Saves the Day. Troy Sanders from Mastodon was on that show, so his signature is somewhere in this chaos. As well as we had all of Trivium sign this guitar, and all of Slipknot, so Clown, Corey Taylor, Jay Weinberg, obviously. Again, this guitar was built by Fender and given to us to auction off and raise money for charity. We ended up raising $50,000 between the event and the items we auctioned off. Probably our highest value item was a Fender Telecaster from Bruce Springsteen that he signed. This was ended up gifted to me, and again, just a very special time in my life. I do really love this guitar. I am kind of meh about the signatures. Like, it's cool, whatever. You can actually see that some of the signatures have been faded away because for a long time I was like, I don't care about the signatures, and I would play this guitar, and it ended up just rubbing off a little bit. I've often thought about taking the signatures off completely because I love Best Buddies. They are a great organization. This is a guitar that I would play on stage and on a daily basis, especially because I don't really own a Fender Telecaster. I own some Tele clones, but I don't own a Fender Telecaster, and so I would play this. And especially to shout out Best Buddies, who, again, is an organization that I truly love and recommend you guys looking into. This is my first ever real guitar. First guitar I ever owned was just a cheap Fender Squier, but that really only lasted like 6 months to a year in my life before I upgraded to this. And so this is really the guitar I learned how to play guitar on. It's a guitar that I've retired. It sits in its case. Picking it up, it's like picking up an old friend. The memories that I have for this guitar, I've modded this. It did have 2 volumes and a tone. It now has 2 volumes and a kill switch because, of course, you have this flame green top, which I remember always being in love with as a kid. When I was young, I was obsessed with Ibanez, and for no other reason than I had this guitar first and I was just loyal to them. Not that there's anything wrong with Ibanez, not like there's something to wag a finger or put your head down at, but it's not a brand that I really gravitate to much anymore. They still make great things. No shade on Ibanez, but really, really love this guitar. It is special to me, and I purchased this guitar for $666. This is another Yamaha BB that they sent me. This was actually the first one they sent me, and this is their highest end BB. I ended up completely sanding this one down and doing this red sparkle finish. Quite poorly, I might add. It used to be the Sunburst, and I did really, really like the Sunburst, but one of my bandmates at the time used to make fun of me for the color, and it really got me self-conscious, which made me drunkenly one night ruin this guitar. But on stage, it looks great. It looks like it was well painted, and in photos, it looks like it was well painted. But when you go up close, it's really rough. There's a lot of orange peel. I put glitter on it so it had like metallic flakes, but I didn't know what I was doing. Same deal though, all the control knobs have been removed and taken out. That's what these little dots are. They're just little covers of those holes. And then just a kill switch installed for the same reason of the original BB. This is my custom shop limited edition Epiphone ES-339. So the 339 is just a little bit smaller than the 335, which I prefer. Again, I'm not a huge dude, so an ES-335 is just a little awkward for me, where this fits me very, very well. I got this thing off Craigslist. I traded a bass for it, and at the time, I didn't really know anything about 339s. I saw ES and was like, oh, I don't own one of those, let me get that. I found out about the 339s just by purchasing this guitar. He put the Bigsby on. That's my least favorite part about this guitar, because I do really, really love this guitar. It sounds great, and honestly, out of all of the guitars I own, when people come over to the house, this is the one that people try to buy off me the most. It sounds great, it plays great, and has such a cool vibe. You could tell that whoever owned this before was a smoker or left this out by a window so it got a lot of sun, because it has like greened and yellowed on the top and even on the neck a little bit, but you can see the back of the headstock is still like the Pelham blue, but there's also like metal flakes in it, and it's somewhat of a transparent finish so you can see wood grain. It dances a little bit. It's a really, really interesting guitar, and again, it plays great, it sounds great. I did change the pickups out to be, I believe these are Seymour Duncan Antiquities. This is a really, really cool guitar. I don't care that it says Epiphone. It's a great guitar. I love the 339 shape, and it sounds fantastic. This is a fun guitar from how it looks, how it sounds, and even what it is. This is a Baritone by Eastwood, which I'm not super familiar with Eastwood. I was just looking for a baritone one day, and they had this at a music store I happened to be at. So I picked it up. I use this in the studio all the time. Really what I'll do is, like on choruses, I'll put this underneath to fatten up the chorus, so when the chorus hits, it really gets big and pops, and then when it comes out, goes into the verse or reintro or whatever, I'll take it out so it just dynamically falls back down a little bit. But it's in this bright red finish. The shape and the color reminds me of like an old classic car. It does have P90s, so it's not as fat as I guess it could be if it had humbuckers, but it still has a lot of bite, a lot of growl. As you can tell with a lot of my collection, I do really think studio based a lot of the times, because at the end of the day, sure, it's cool to have a bunch of awesome guitars live, but especially now in my life, I buy a lot of guitars thinking about recording in studio. Oh, I don't have something that can do that, so let me get this, and that'll allow me to do that. So a baritone is a must-have if you're a recording artist, because again, it gives you another sound, another dimension to add to your recordings. This is my Yamaha A3R acoustic, and when they sent this guitar to me, I was playing a few acoustic shows, so they sent it out, and I told them, look, I'll play this live, I'll let people see it, but this isn't going to be my number one. I already had an acoustic that I was extremely happy with, and I was like, there's no way you can replace that in my life. And no joke, I took it out of the case, I strummed one chord, probably a G chord, and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is so nice. And for a long time, it was my number one, and in a lot of ways it still is. I would say either this or the Epiphone Excelente are my number ones. And I really don't have much to say about this guitar besides you're sleeping on Yamaha. They make great stuff, especially for the money. I don't think you can beat it most days. If you haven't looked at them, I highly recommend that you do. Now this is my first ever bass, a G&L L-2000, and I got this probably when I was like 15, 16 years old. Again, it's kind of like seeing an old friend again. Like, I remember a lot of the dings and scratches and little nicks and paint damages that this thing has, and I was really influenced by Eddie Van Halen when I was a kid, so I remember I ripped out the strap buttons one day and put these big eye hooks on there like he has on his guitar, but mine were just like ridiculously sized, so there's just huge gashes there that I had to fill, and there's paint chipping from that, which I don't regret. I don't regret. You have to do things like that when you're first starting. What's really cool about this bass is all the options you have. So it is dual humbuckers, but you have bass, treble, and volume, and then you have these three switches. The middle switch just makes it active or passive. Super straightforward. These are three-way switches, these other two. And so basically, up, you're just using this one pole. Down, just using the bottom pole, and middle, you're using both. And then same thing with this three-way switch, up, just the top, down, just the bottom, middle, both of them. So you have a lot of tonal variety in just this one bass, which is pretty impressive. This is one of the nicest guitars I own in my opinion. This is a Fender American Professional 2, which has all the comfort cuts and a heel cut, and it even has this neck that is finished in a way that feels almost vintage. This is my first ever Fender Strat, which again, hard to believe how long I have been playing guitar, and last year was the first time I ever got a Strat. It does have a push-pull knob. I don't really know much of what it does in this configuration because I don't really care. I also like to keep the bridge a little bit raised just so I can go both ways as well as down. That's something I get a lot of shit for from friends and guitar players and stuff, but I don't want to do anything crazy. This is obviously not the whammy system you do much crazy stuff with. But until I bought this guitar, I didn't realize how much you need a single coil guitar and a really nice Strat in your collection, especially if you record a lot and you're in the studio. And this guitar kind of showed me the light, and ever since this, I've gotten a lot of single coil or P90 style guitars because it's like, oh, those are viable too. I've always been a humbucker guy because that's 90% of my sound, but sometimes it's really nice. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite guitars to just like putz around with and doodle, because it just opens up doors that I don't normally go down with humbuckers. And so it has inspired a lot of really creative ideas for me. Professional 2 Series, it's an American-made guitar. Again, it has the comfort cuts and the heel cut, which that was really the selling factor for me, is this heel cut. When I found out that Fender was doing that, I was like, okay, I should get a Strat, and that's the Strat I want. And the sunburst finish is just classic and classy. So for a Strat, I feel like this is really, really hard to beat. One thing that I hate about Fenders, and I'm going to say this, and I bet a lot of you are going to agree with me, is the shrink wrap that they put on the pick guards. I get why they do it. They want to protect it. I totally understand that, and that is fair. But can we figure out a way in 2024 to do it where it doesn't leave these little fuzzies behind? Because you have to remove all the damn screws to get it all off, and I don't want to remove the pickup screws because I really don't want to have to readjust it and reinstall them, so on and so forth. And so I'm left with all these little parts of the plastic pick guard, and it's quite annoying. So it's 2024 Fender. If there's one complaint, figure it out. You got it. You guys are killer everywhere else. You can figure out how to fix that, and I would really, really appreciate it. If I had to pick a number 2 bass, this might be it. This is me being a Beatles nerd and just really, really loving it, but I do use this a lot. I got a lot of crap from some friends when I bought this guitar because they were like, dude, you're never, ever going to use that thing. And I have to say, it ends up on a lot of tracks. If I'm doing an acoustic song, there's really 1 of 3 basses that end up on the track, and I guess you could say a third of the time, or probably more, about 50% of the time, this is the bass that ends up being on that track. It is obviously a Hofner violin bass. It has a original celluloid pickguard, which you can see has off-gassed a little bit onto some of the hardware, a little bit onto the pickups, but I think a lot of these body paint marks that you see here, I think a lot of that's from the off-gassing of the celluloid. I can't be certain, but if I had to guess, that's what it would be. But I love the craftsmanship of this guitar. There's a lot of flaming throughout the whole thing. The top is pretty just plain, nothing crazy, but the sides, the neck, and the back especially just has all this really, really cool flame. Sure, it's a Beatles nerd instrument, but it is a viable instrument. Paul used it for a reason, and it does have great sounds. And you got to remember, like, the Beatles were pretty diverse as a band, and sure, Paul had several basses that he would go through here and there, but this was his main instrument, and so it does have a lot of diversity that most people probably would undermine and not really consider, but it has become such a useful tool in my songwriting and in my recordings that I'm very, very thankful for this bass. Here's the first Framus I ever received, and originally this was a high glass white guitar, and so I completely modded this thing. I sanded it down, not to its bare wood, but to just the rough white, which you could still see poking through, and then I literally took house paint and put this like crackle finish over the white, and then put the the blue on, and then like with a blow dryer heated it real quick so it got this natural splitting, and then just put some gloss over that to help protect it. But it didn't really do much. A lot of this is still chipping off, especially on the back and high play areas. You can see a lot of it coming off. And I also wrote this witty thing, "A generation addicted to attention," on it. Phrase that I don't want to say I invented, but I came up with in my personal life. And the band I was playing with at the time, I was like, oh, we should name our album that, or we should write a song that, or something. And my band members didn't really think it was too special. And so I was like, all right, screw you guys. I'm going to paint my guitar with it, and we'll have that saying at every show we play. And so that's what I did. Again, highly modded. I changed the pickups to these Seymour Duncans. I don't remember what series these are. I took off all the hardware and sanded it down by hand with sandpaper, so you could still see some of the black of the original Floyd and on the tuning pegs and stuff. But it's really cool, in my opinion, with that vibe. It has a lot of vibe to it because it's not just one color. It is distressed and beaten up and stuff. Also, kill switch, 3-way toggle with 2 volumes, and all of the Floyd Rose stuff is upgraded to FU tone. So I have the big block, I have the silent springs, everything is FU tone replaced. But one of the really cool things that is original and that I would never want to change is the neck. Has really great flaming to it. It just dances in the light, and those are things that I haven't really appreciated about guitars until pretty recently. Like, sure, I would look at it and be like, oh, cool, whatever. But that was what it was. It was, oh, cool, whatever. And now I look at it and I'm like, man, that's just really, really cool and special. So, yeah, even painted the headstock. So this Framus logo is actually just a sticker with gloss then over it. Again, everything has been changed about this guitar. And I will say this is also a guitar that I have really since retired. It's not something that I pretty much ever use anymore. However, I do have a plan for this guitar, and one day I think I'm going to sacrifice this guitar for someone I love, just like Jimi Hendrix sacrificed his guitar for something he loved. At the time of me filming this video, this is probably the guitar, or at least one of the guitars that I play the most. This is a Lucero classical guitar. I am not familiar with that brand at all. This is just a Chinese-made classical guitar. Really shouldn't be anything special or different. It's just a fun thing to play around with, and I find myself writing a lot on this guitar right now. I pretty much always write my music on an acoustic guitar, whether that's a loud rock song or an acoustic song. But this thing, the zebra wood back and sides, just look how beautiful that is. That is a guitar that is undeniable. It is just gorgeous. Company I've never heard of, and just a Chinese guitar. The attention to detail on this is really second to none. And it's not an expensive guitar. I think I paid, I don't know, $300 for this or something. It stays in tune remarkably well, which classical guitars are notoriously have an issue with. Not this one. And it's fun to play. I do find that my writing style is a little bit different with this guitar right now because of it being a classical. I'm doing a lot of like finger picking stuff, which is not my normal writing style. So it has changed my direction a little bit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different thing. This is another early guitar for me that has since been heavily modded. like I said, when I was young, I had an affinity for Ibanez guitars, and this guitar I thought was really, really cool. I got this at Arc Music in Boca Raton, Florida, which was a music store that I worked for. Again, it's been heavily modded. I added a kill switch to it. I feel like there used to be at least another knob to this, but now that I'm thinking about it, it might have always been just a one knob volume guitar. I can't remember. I do love this trem system. Amazingly, I've put so many different gauges of strings on this guitar, and I've never once needed to fix this bridge. Don't ask me how, I do not know. But I've put 9s on here, I've put 10s, 11s. I don't think I've gone as heavy as 12s. But one thing that is really cool about this design is if you need to change the bridge, you just roll this whatever way you need to change it. It's so much simpler than the screws and all of that of the Floyd designs, which can be annoying and frustrating. But I also liked that I could get my hand underneath here, and so I never really kept the whammy bar on here. I would just do a note and either press down, or I would just lift this up. So, which is a horrible way to do things, but when you're just kind of doing it as an effect and not so worried about being precise, then you can get away with just, because it's just a cool effect. I also added, and this is something I personally think every guitar with a locking system should have, I added Allen keys to the back of the headstock. It's completely out of the way of my fretting hand. I'm not anywhere close to it, even no matter how I put my hands. I would never hit that. But unfortunately, I broke the headstock on this guitar. This is the only headstock break I've had so far, and I'd like it to be my last. But I remember for some reason I was aggravated and I threw it on the couch, and I didn't even, like, it wasn't like I tossed it across the room. I just like took it off and threw it onto the couch that was right there. It didn't take a big fall, but it snapped the headstock off, and that's really unfortunate. Also, this body is rail thin. This is the thinnest guitar I own. It is crazy thin, and you can see it has this black paint on the sides. That is actually the original paint color of this guitar. I had went and sanded it down to its natural wood, and you can still see a lot of the black in the wood grain and also some of the like back worming and stuff like that. But I left the sides black because I thought it was really cool. Again, I didn't change anything. I just kept this. When I was sanding it, I obviously wasn't sanding the sides originally. I was just sanding the top and the back, and then I was like, you know what? That's pretty sweet. And so I do really love that about this guitar, but the reason I sanded it down to begin with is it started to get really ugly. This paint is really, really thin, which can be great at times, but I was getting a lot of picking marks that would show the original wood grain, and it was just like a spot here and a spot there, and it just was, it didn't look good. I like relic jobs. I like relic guitars, whether they're natural or man-made, but it didn't look good on this. It looked cheap and crappy, and so I sanded it down, and I think it added a whole new life to this guitar. And with the thin body, you have a super thin neck, and it's just a great, great guitar. This is a Fender acoustic bass. This is the Kingman series, and there's really not much I have to say about this. It's just all black. It's not super expensive or anything super fancy, but it is a cool thing to have. I've played shows with this. Other than that, it does actually sit around. I'm not gonna lie. Pretty much collects dust. But for live settings, when you need an acoustic bass, you need an acoustic bass. In the studio, it's not really something you really need, but for live, when you need it, you need it. This is a Fender acoustic 12-string. Again, there's really not much too special about this. It is something that I use in the studio a lot and is great. It actually has been on a lot of tracks. But one thing that I do want to mention that is super cool about this guitar is this funky back. There's like flame, quilt, a lot of just weirdness happening on the back, and I don't really know what to think about it. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's happening. It's strange, but it's cool. Well, we're talking about quilt guitars. This is a limited edition quilt top Bobinga Dean V. And this is the first guitar that my mom bought me when I was 16, 17 years old or something. You have the abalone inlays, the quilt Bobinga top, even the abalone logo with the Dean V headstock, and a mahogany back and neck. This guitar is just a work of art. I have since changed the pickups because it just had some crappy Dean pickups, whatever, in there. And so now they have super hot Seymour Duncans. Dean did really knock it out of the park with this one. This is a 6-string bass, but unlike most 6-string basses, this is tuned like a guitar. It's called the Bass 6. And it was made famous by Fender and Squier. This is actually what John Lennon and George Harrison used to use when Paul McCartney was playing piano. Because all of the basses that they typically had in the studio were left-handed instruments, because Paul's left-handed, they would play this when Paul was playing piano. So this is something I picked up for the studio because I thought this is a good thing to have around. Now this is probably the closest thing I have to a real Fender Telecaster. You might ask, hey, that is a Fender Telecaster, but it's not. I actually built this guitar. I bought the neck because I didn't want to have to worry about building a neck, but I bought a big board of ash. I cut it up, glued it together, milled it down, and then cut the Telecaster shape. I put all the electronics in myself. So this is a Brandon Bruce Telecaster, not a Fender. But it's really cool. I put D'Addario locking tuners on it, which are really great. I really love those. They're self-cutting and everything. It's not a real Telecaster, so in my head, I still need a Fender Telecaster. This is another hidden gem in my collection. This is a Crafter acoustic. And if you've never heard of Crafter, well, I don't blame you. I only know of them because their reps used to come into Arc Music, the music store I used to work at. They've gone in and out of business a few times. They've gone defunct and have come back, but under a new Japanese owner, which this used to be made in Canada. I'm sure they were made elsewhere, but the company used to be out of Canada. Yeah, this says Korean made. And this is a guitar where someone comes to my house and they just pick this up and strum. You can tell how loud and percussive it actually is. And people are always blown away by this instrument. And they look at the headstock and go, Crafter, who is that? And I have to tell them the whole story, but I've written a lot of songs on this guitar. Like I said, that one Framus is probably the most songs I've ever written on an instrument. And if it's not that one, it's this one, because those two guitars, they've been in my life longer than most of these guitars in this room. But also, this has just been my go-to for so long. This was my #1 before Yamaha sent me that acoustic, and still it is something that I pick up a lot. I was playing it last night, as a matter of fact. And so I love this guitar, and I don't think there'll ever be a time in my life where I don't have appreciation or don't have this in my life. I can't see ever getting rid of it. Now, this guitar is my first attempt at a build. Admittedly, this was a kit guitar, not me buying wood, cutting it up, milling it, doing the whole process. This was just a bunch of kit items that I found and purchased, but this was, at least at that time in my life, exactly what I wanted from a guitar. I love the offset body shape. That was a must-have. I wanted a unfinished neck, got that. I like locking tuners, got that. As you can see, like I was talking about possibly doing with the Kurt Cobain, I just taped this pin off so it's completely rolled off. This is my kill switch. Even though these are soap bar pickups, these are actually custom wound Seymour Duncans that are humbucking pickups in a soap bar body. So those are actually humbucking pickups. This guitar, again, like seeing an old friend. I don't play this guy often, but it is one that I constantly come back to because it is everything that I want in a guitar and everything that I love in a guitar. I've spent a lot of time, a lot of hours with this thing, and it'll never be replaced fully. This is my third and final Yamaha BB broad bass. This is the 400 series, and it is the only bass I have with a maple neck, and they sent this to me for a tour that I was supposed to go on right before COVID, and then COVID canceled it. And so I've actually never ended up touring this guitar, but it had a really boomy, bassy sound that really wasn't my vibe, and so I embraced it. So I put flat wound strings on it and embraced the boom, and I use this a lot in the studio. Again, I say I have 3 basses for acoustic songs. This is one of them, my Hofner's one of them, and then the Jack Casady is the other. But I use this guitar so much, and it is in like pristine shape because it's never left my house. It's never left the basement of my house. It is just in perfect condition. There's not a single scratch or flaw or ding or dent on this thing. And same with all my broad basses. The tone controls have been ripped out and plugged, and then there's just a kill switch. So 100% or 0%, just the way I like it. But beautiful neck on this thing, really great sounding bass, and just perfect for some flat wound stuff. Now this guitar is my beater guitar. This is just a cheap Mitchell acoustic. Really nothing special about it. I'm pretty sure Guitar Center owns the Mitchell brand. Don't quote me on that, but I think that is truth. I personally think that every guitarist needs just a cheap beater guitar. If you're going to the beach, take your cheap beater guitar. Don't take your nice guitar. If you're going on the boat or just anything, there is times and place for beater guitars. Now, obviously, depending on what level you're at in your career, your beater guitar will be a different quality. I'm sure Slash, if he had a beater guitar, that's like $1,000, $2,000 guitar, not a $200 guitar, which this is probably less than $200 at the end of the day. I don't remember for certain because, again, I don't even remember how this came into my life, but it is in my life, and that's that. Now, last but certainly not least is my Fender Ed O'Brien signature guitar. Now, this guitar is special in many, many ways. First off, I think out of my entire collection behind me, this is my only maple neck guitar. We just saw the bass that I have that is a maple neck, but I think this is the only maple neck guitar. I'm looking. I don't see any, so I'm gonna go on record and say this is my only maple neck. And so that gives me a lot of clean tones and really, really brilliant cleans too. This guitar is fantastic at that. It does grit up a good bit as well, but clean sound-wise, man, this guitar just can't be beaten. But also, with the Ed O'Brien is you have the sustainer pickup. Similar to my Manson, so you have the on-off switch, you have the root note, the octave, and then a blend of the two. But what's really cool about this guitar is instead of volume, volume, tone, like most Fenders are known to have, this is volume, tone, volume. And your last volume only controls the sustainer pickup. So you can actually add more or take out some. You can dictate how much sustainer you have, but you can also do that with your normal pickups. So you can blend those really, really well. You can turn off all your other pickups and just have the sustainer. You could do that vice versa, or you could blend the two. 5-way switch like most Fenders, and you also have this really cool badge on the end that has this weird geometric logo. I don't know if that's significant to Ed O'Brien or Radiohead. To be completely honest, I didn't buy it for him or them. I bought it for the sustainer pickup because I was like, how cool is it to have a Strat with a sustainer pickup? And so that's what I did, and absolutely no regrets. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And leave a comment. Tell me which guitar of mine is your favorite.